The American automobile industry boomed thanks to the rapid expansion of the oil industry, which provided cheap and seemingly inexhaustible fuel throughout the country. Europe's experience was similar, but on a lesser scale. The pressing demand for oil triggered fierce competition between the majors and independent companies on both sides of the Atlantic, as each strived to conquer new oil fields in the most remote parts of the world. A new kind of hero emerged from this treasure hunt, which at times resembled the old colonial conquest campaigns. He was to be both a scholar and an adventurer, an oil geologist who would become a hero of the modern time.
Well, an oil geologist is of course in some regards a scientist, but he's not exactly the same kind of scientist as you would find in a laboratory, because it's more like a combination between being a doctor or a detective. You have certain points of information, certain knowledge, but you have to imagine what happens in between. You can't see into the middle of the earth. You can't know what happens in the Jurassic period. So you need a certain amount of imagination. But on the other hand, you can't just be free with your imagination. You have to apply a kind of rigorous logic to your analysis. And you're looking for clues, you could say. You don't get all the information you need. You're having indications here, hints over here, and you put it together. Or to make the other analogy, you could say it's like a doctor who analyzes the condition of a patient. He can never be quite sure.
According to the recruiting standards of the time, the would-be oil geologist had to be young, tough and single on account of the tough conditions in the field.
I remember once we went to a little village in the western Colombia, and at the end of the day we came out onto a road to walk back to this village, and suddenly round the corner came 50 Colombian troops with automatic weapons pointing at us. And I thought, my God, what is the least aggressive thing I can do? And by chance I had a sandwich in my pocket, so I sat down and ate the sandwich. And I thought no one would have the heart to shoot somebody eating a sandwich. And eventually an officer came and explained, we were able to explain who we were, but we were again mistaken for bandits in this case. And the normal practice in Colombia was to shoot first and ask who you were afterwards. So we were lucky. But there were many such incidents, and I would say in a strange way, it was a magnificent life really, because you were free, for goodness sake. I went off for months on my own with these fantastic men who worked with me, and it was exciting and fun, and you were free of the terrible office life and all those management people and everybody. You had to do whatever you did, and it was your decision. And I think that makes people with that experience a little bit independent in the way they think and behave, which means they don't always fit too well in the modern company.
During the first decades of the 20th century, the geologists and their teams discovered oil in countries spanning the world. The rulers of many of these countries, which were often far from industrialized, had no concept of the wealth the oil represented, which the majors used to their advantage.
Dans les pays du Moyen-Orient et les pays producteurs de pétrole en général, ce qu'on appelle concession, en fait, c'était les accords signés ou parfois marqués de l'empreinte digitale d'un cheikh ou d'un émir par-ci par-là, pour que des sociétés étrangères viennent faire tout. C'est-à-dire, ils exploitent le pétrole de A à Z. Exploration, production, transport, raffinage, etc. Et en contrepartie, il versait à ces pays une certaine somme d'argent sous forme de redevances ou d'impôts. Mais au total, c'était des sommes en général ridicules. Ridicules.
Following the war, the majors competed fiercely. The huge demand and limited supply that had strengthened their position during the war was now replaced by years of plenty, and prices began to collapse. And so the 7 most powerful majors in the world, 5 American and 2 English, met in secret in Scotland to put an end to their ruinous outbidding. These 7 majors were later to be known as the Seven Sisters.
The competitive struggles between the oil majors came and went. I think that they were likened, I think Anthony Sampson in his famous book on the Seven Sisters quoted, I think it may have been Gulbenkian, but there was this quotation that it was always difficult to know with the international oil companies, you know, they were like cats, it was said, it was difficult to know whether they were fighting or making love. In 1928, Henry Detterding gathered the heads of some of the other majors to a castle that he rented in Scotland at a place called Achnacarry, because there had been these intense bouts of competition in international markets, and there was a lot of surplus production capacity in the international oil industry. And I suppose much as OPEC ministers might later have met under similar conditions to try to regulate that process, to try to stop the market being glutted with oil, the purpose behind the meeting at Achnacarry was to try to control production, to control the world oil industry, so that prices would be stable, the world wouldn't be flooded with oil. So it was a cartel that was proposed and which resulted from the Achnacarry Agreement. Basically what was agreed were, you know, systems of quotas which were meant to hold up prices in key markets.
During the decades that followed, many countries tried to rid themselves of domination by the Seven Sisters. The first to try was Mexico, which for a long time had been under the influence of the United States and had a history of revolution. As early as the turn of the 20th century, British and American prospectors had seen Mexico as a possible source of oil. What's more, the government of the day saw itself as a modern government and wanted to enjoy some of the fortunes it had seen its American neighbor enjoy. As an incentive to come to Mexico, it offered the oil companies tax concessions on exportation and capital investment. Initially, the open-door policy allowed oil production to develop at a breathtaking pace, encouraged by the discovery of numerous giant oil fields. The majors, however, behaved with no consideration for the country and enjoyed a golden age. After the Mexican Revolution between 1913 and 1917, the relationship between the government and the majors drastically changed, and their privileges were questioned. The creation of the Workers' Confederation in 1918 and the formation of the Oil Workers' Union in 1935 seriously modified the balance of power within the oil companies. In 1936, the union presented a collective labour agreement plan demanding provision for a pay rise. The majors refused their demands on the grounds that they made no profits, and so a general strike was declared in the middle of 1937. Meanwhile, a commission of experts declared the majors were in fact incredibly prosperous. The Mexican government demanded the oil workers' claims be met, but the majors, overestimating their power, refused.
Nuestra contestación es definitivamente no.
On March the 18th, 1938, in a demonstration of his power, Lázaro Cárdenas, the President of the Republic and a key figure of the Mexican left-wing party, demanded the Mexican assets of the 17 Anglo-American oil companies.